the Armchair producers garb. Yes, that's right. 5 out of 7 Russian bots approve of this podcast. I am joined
Slightly fewer now
on
after the
this-
invasion of Ukraine, it should be noted, but yes.
we just so like underneath it, we just put a thing saying I support the Ukraine.
Yes, this
just
t-shirt
to cover
predates
it.
the invasion.
Yes. This is the auspicious episode 177, I believe. Actually, yes, I just need to quickly update the note on that one. 177. There we go. Done. Awesome. We're good. We're live. It's all sorted. We, as always, are joined by the talent, the man who will save us all, the warrior, the fighter, Mr. Travis Croft. How are you, sir?
I am fine and dandy. It's getting cool again here in Melbourne, so I actually got to wear my winter coat today, and I still managed to get rained on, even though I had an umbrella, because that's Melbourne for you. We might be having some new people join the Armchair Producers fold who happen to share a common workplace with me. I should apologize in advance. As I did flag with anybody who cared to listen, we are not super professional, but we have fun doing the show, and we hope our listeners have fun with it as well. Believe it or not, this version of the show is the streamlined version of the show compared to what it was 12 months ago. So take that for what it is, and
we have trimmed down. We are live 1 hour 30 minutes. Pretty consistently now.
It's pretty close, yeah. Anyway, speaking of that, considering in the interest of brevity, shall we this week's chain movie? Should we just move on into that?
Let's go straight into it. You picked this one, sir. It is the 2004 Zack Snyder directed Dawn of the Dead.
A nurse, a policeman, a candlestick maker, a nurse, a policeman, a young married couple, a salesman, and other survivors of a worldwide plague that is producing aggressive, flesh-eating zombies take refuge in a mega Midwestern shopping mall. The interesting things about this film, it is directed by Zack Snyder. It is written by James Gunn. James Gunn has our link to last week's masterpiece, Scooby-Doo. I believe this is one of his follow-ons from a couple of years after Scooby-Doo. So interesting that he got the reins to this. It's also a writing credit given to one of my favorite filmmakers of all time, George A. Romero, as it is a remake of the 1978 Dawn of the Dead, written and directed by George Romero, which is one of my favorite films. It stars Sarah Polley, Ving Rhames, Mekhi Phifer, some other names you might see that look a bit familiar. Ty Burrell, probably best known for his work on TV's Modern Family. Michael Kelly as CJ. He is a face probably you'll recognize. What was he known? He was in Man of Steel. Bunch of other things.
Yeah, he's one of those guys who's like, oh, that guy.
Yeah, you see him heaps of stuff. You'd know the face, but you probably wouldn't know what he was. You know, other than that, I don't think you're gonna know.
Oh, that's where I saw him most recently.
I guess
in the new Jack Ryan series. Yeah.
Yes, he. Liev Schreiber played the same role, I think, in one of the films. Anyway, I selected this film mainly because I thought it was an interesting historical document. I've seen people kicking around now. That's how old it is. People going, did you know the old DC guy made a film together? Zack Snyder, of course, was the DC EU there for a while until it all came crashing down around him. And of course, we have DCU Czar. I don't know if it's an official title for him yet, but that was the man who's going to run the show from here on out, apparently. So interesting that they're not completely moving on from Snyder. Like it seems like Warner Brothers are going to run some sort of Snyder Fest or something like that, where they're going to show all the Snyder films. I don't know if it's like a film festival or a convention.
I think it's just like a celebration of his tenure in DC movies, because it's basically just everything that he either wrote, directed, and produced, and it's like, okay, sure.
So
might as well. You're not really releasing anything else at the moment, because we're still waiting.
So for those who aren't familiar with what we're talking about, these terms are sort of very interchangeable if you're in the know. The
Yeah.
DCEU includes films like, well, for Snyder, it was three films: The Man of Steel, Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice, and Justice League. Zack Snyder's Justice League, which was the 3-hour version, the 4 hours, the really, really long version that came out a couple of years ago. I think he had a co-directing credit. Did he have a co-directing credit in the original version? I can't remember. He did direct the original version of Justice League that came out in 2016, which he couldn't finish it though due to a family tragedy. It was finished ruined by the piece of shit that is Joss Whedon.
Yes, not only did he ruin a movie, but he kind of helped ruin his career.
Ruin his career at the same time. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, Google it. But so Snyder is now on the outs. James Gunn's in, and I thought it's interesting that people are now going, "Wow, did you know they made a film together?" Because I'm like, yeah, I already knew that. And so it's got a few interesting angles in the film there, based on a film, one of my favorites, and some interesting names involved.
Now, going on off of that, obviously, as someone who has known you for a number of years now, I've known and you make it very clear at the start of our friendship that you were a big fan of George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead. And what did you initially think when this came out, 2004? What did you think of that property being remade for the modern audience? Because this came out 2 years after the little independent Danny Boyle movie that helped regenerate the zombie franchise 28 days later.
Well, I mean, first things first, they aren't zombies, they're infected. So they aren't dead. They aren't dead. The people in the Danny Boyle film are not dead, so they are not zombies. Funny thing is, I didn't know this was happening at the time. I remember I went and saw this on a Thursday night at Southland, as I lived in with my girlfriend at the time, and I think it was like a sneak peek or something like that, because it just came out a week later or something. It was sort of one of those things they do a week ahead of advance to build some hype. And I think I just read about it in the paper or something, and thought, fuck, they remade that film, I need to go see it. It's interesting, James Gunn talks about getting hate mail from Romero fans going, they gave fucking the guy who wrote Scooby-Doo is going to write Dawn of the Dead.
To be fair, that's one hell of a swing.
It is a swing. And in hindsight, you go, of course James Gunn would do that, but like he was not, the person we all know now. So here's the interesting thing. My initial reaction when I saw this was, I fucking loved this. This film was really entertaining, and I thought, while it doesn't capture a lot of the same things that the original did, in the sense of, if you haven't seen the original, there's a lot of social commentary and satire incorporated into the film, which is what makes when zombie films are great, that's kind of usually where they play. This is Zack Snyder, right? He's his first feature. He's come straight from doing music videos and stuff like that. James Gunn's second feature, straight out of Troma. These guys were not playing with subtle things like social commentary, social satire, and symbolism and that kind of thing. They made a balls to the wall horror action film, and initially I remember thinking they did really well. If you actually detach yourself from the things that made the original really special, this film is. I felt initially this film was still very entertaining. What's been interesting over the preceding 19 years is it gets worse every time I see it.
Yeah.
And I'm watching it again this week. I was like, this film really isn't very good. There are a couple of bits and pieces here that it pulls off fairly nicely. But as an overall package, it's fairly shallow and uninteresting stuff. Yeah. And I think it shows some of the flaws for me in what we all came to know and hate about Zack Snyder. I mean, I don't hate Zack Snyder, but his work can be, at its worst, quite flawed. I remember you and I disagree quite deeply on Batman versus Superman, but I really didn't like what he did, pretty much all of his DC stuff. I think Snyder is a man who values spectacle. He films spectacle very, very well. And it's style over substance. Not quite at a Michael Bay level, but
imagine if they teamed up on a movie.
That would be interesting. It could be entertaining. But I mean, the thing about Michael Bay for me is he's gonna have a punchline now. He doesn't pretend to be anything he's not.
That's true.
Michael Bay doesn't go around. No one's selling us, the new film from the auteur Michael Bay. Like it's not. It's fun, explosions, and action.
Yeah.
He's not going to remake Hamlet.
I'd kind of watch a Michael Bay version of Hamlet. Though.
It kind of would be like that version of Hamlet in, Last Action Hero. To be or not to be, not to be. That would be entertaining. But I remember when he took over with DC imprimatur, he was like, "Oh, from the auteur, singular filmmaker, Zack Snyder," and I'm like, for me, he's made one really great film, and that film is Watchmen.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's going to set a lot of people off, and a lot of very average films, but this one here, anyway, I don't think he can be forgiven as his first feature, but I think this sets the trend we see for him.
Yeah.
There are some very big sort of set piece visual moments where you go, that's fucking cool.
Yeah.
If I think of the scene of the people when they escape the shopping mall in the buses, driving through the sea of zombies, that's a pretty cool visual.
Yeah. Even the more simplistic one of when Sarah Polly comes out of the house at the start and just that kind of panny shot of the neighborhood and just small bits of kind of chaos. Just
for me, the strongest part of his film, you're 100% right. The strongest part of his film is the first 5 to 10 minutes. The opening sequence of his film is inspired to filmmaking. I think no doubt about that. Like even Michelle, who was watching it with me, she's not a fan of Snyder, not a massive fan of zombie films. Even perked up and said, "Oh, that's pretty cool." At the first 10 minutes, the opening credits are super cool. Like what he did that first 10 minutes, that was what you made a set up and go, "Okay, you're not fucking around here, right?" Like, unfortunately, it goes downhill from there. But you're right. The film opens with Sarah Polly, who's a nurse, arriving home after a shift at work. She wakes up in the middle of the night with her boyfriend, husband, significant other, and they're attacked by their neighbor, little girl, who is now zombified, turns him into a zombie, and she manages to escape from him by quickly jumping out the bathroom window, getting in her car, and driving off. One of my favorite moments in the film, actually, is her boyfriend, for want of a better term, sprinting down the street after her as she's driving away, only to notice a couple of doors down, her neighbor standing, looking confused on the front lawn, and you suddenly go, and just go jump, just go her like a hungry dog.
Not easy target.
And the opening sequence of that Johnny Cash song after that is just beautiful. I love the start of his film, but where I think we get bogged down, and I'm interested to hear what you think about it, is with the characters, in the sense that, I mean, you've seen the original, correct? Like we have 4 main characters. We spent a lot of time with those people. It's a longer film than this one, for sure. But we spent a lot of time with those people, and we learn who they are. And I'm going to beat around the bush. The people who they hired as actors in that film are fucking terrible actors.
Yeah.
Except for maybe Ken Foray. The other 3 are like pretty shithouse actors, and the acting's pretty bad.
Yeah.
But you still get to know these characters and you care about them. So when shit's a fan, you really are on their side for them to survive what's happening. But in this film, we quickly meet Sarah Polly, who's kind of our protagonist.
Yeah.
And then we meet a whole bunch of other people who we never spent any time with.
No, and they're all very paint by numbers characters. I think that Anna and Kenneth, Sarah Polly and Ving Rhames' characters, have got the best dynamic, but that's not saying much in a overall very lackluster. Considering the inspired opening of the movie, I feel like the time that we spend in the shopping mall and how they slowly build this pseudo community, it's sort of like, okay, so that was did you just use it all up at the start and then not actually have anything interesting for the character piece, which is kind of important if you're going to be making us jump from one story to another to another to another. Oh, Doctor, you got to give me something interesting. And there wasn't even too much of a comic relief element to it. It was like, okay.
I mean, it's fair. I mean, you can see some of that trademark gun quippiness especially in a character like Ty Burrell,
Yeah.
who in another life could have been Star-Lord, not Ty Burrell himself, but the actual writing, that really sort of quippy, smart-ass nature. You put that, you twist that in a mean, spirited way, you get Ty Burrell here. You put that in a naive, good-natured way, you get Chris Pratt.
Yeah.
And that quippiness, like of the scene, the dinner scene where Jake Weber's describing all the jobs. Jake Weber, who plays Michael, who described Michael's character without describing how he looks. Like he's just that he's nice. And Ty Burrell has one of the lines of a film where he's going for over 50 different jobs, sort of entry-level jobs he's had. He's going, and it's a damn shame that, this whole end of the world thing got in your way. Interesting sub-story. Apparently, Nathan Fillion auditioned for that role. How much better would this film have been if that was Nathan Fillion? Not to Jake Weber here, but like Nathan Fillion just has more of a screen presence. I love Nathan Fillion.
Yeah.
More Nathan the better. So apparently they filmed other more material like in that section in the dinner scene.
I'm so surprised. Zack Snyder filmed more footage that didn't make it into the theatrical cut.
Touche. Maybe they should have focused on that. But the one that I don't think is anything controversial about me saying the characters are underwritten, underbaked, and almost completely ignored in favor of zombie killing action, which maybe that's what people wanted. But what I think might be slightly controversial is, what did you make of the whole zombie baby subplot?
I can't decide. I saw it as painfully obvious. In a scenario like that, you're sitting in a movie that is this dumb action zombie movie. Of course, they're going to try and put something of a kind of moral quandary into it, and it's like, let's make a pregnant woman give birth to an undead baby. Is it born with sin and have all of this kind of thought process behind it? So like, no, I don't think they were thinking that biblical at all, and it felt derivative, even though I don't entirely know where from it. And the way that they kind of were protective of it, it's like, you see the baby, right? You know what it is, right? It's gonna kill you. Have you never played a video game? Have you never played Silent Hill? Like undead babies and all sorts of shit like that. If a baby was there, the color of that fucking thing with the evil, like, we're going to be talking about Triangle of Sadness later on. That is a triangle of hate. Right? As far as like, no, I am going to take a shovel and I am going to bury that thing as far down in the earth as I can. So it didn't elicit anything that I think they were trying to do. Like, it wasn't scary. It looked dumb. It
did look dumb.
It wasn't morally. It wasn't a moral quandary for me. It was like, okay, yeah, that's just another thing.
I didn't find it particularly distasteful or bothersome the first time around. But every time I watch it again, that part of the film bothers me more. In the sense that you're right, it looks stupid. I think I should probably note, though, that according to the trivia on IMDb, this film had its budget slashed after the failure of House of the Dead a couple of years earlier. Now, come on, look, I mean, I am all for. I'm not the biggest Zack Snyder fan here in the world, but like, just because an Uwe Boll film flopped. So if you don't know who Uwe Boll is, he is a historically awful film director from Germany who mainly makes films based on video games for super cheap that are awful. Of course, House of the Dead flopped. So maybe that's why some of the effects like that didn't look so great if it was operating on a slightly lower budget.
Maybe.
I just think Mekhi Phifer's character is deeply underwritten. In the sense that, like, okay, it's a classic trope. Oh no, the person has a bite that they're hiding, and they haven't told anybody they've been bitten. It's such a trope. And throw a little bit more work into the character between him and his wife about the nature of their relationship and how people would just be cool if the fact
Yeah.
they hadn't seen her in a week or something. Like,
Yeah, that didn't raise any alarm bells. Nothing. No. Oh, okay.
it needed a little bit more fat in the bone there. And I mean, honestly, I think the film could have done without it. In the
Yeah.
end, it was just sort of a precursor for them leaving the mall. But
Yeah.
they really need to leave the mall because it was kind of tragic and a couple of people died in the incident. But like,
Yeah.
it's a weak reason for wanting people to leave the mall. If you go back to the original, what happens is the mall is overrun by a biker gang of raiders, and that's what sort of precipitates them leaving the mall, as
Yeah.
opposed to just sort of one tragedy like this.
Yeah.
It doesn't really wash for me compared to
Yeah.
how well written the end of the original was. Also, I guess the mall is kind of a character again in the original, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
it's an important part of the story. It's most of the story is them and the mall. The mall here is really almost a pit stop.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not gonna say it's probably a third of the film takes place in the mall.
Yeah, and it's there's certain movies where they're set in a limited location, and that offers some really interesting and challenging narrative pathways that you can go through. And in the original Dawn of the Dead, you're right that a shopping mall is a character. It is kind of well built and constructed to be an instrumental part of the story. Nakatomi Plaza is the way that it's laid out, the limitations of it, and John McClane going through the vents and things like that. It's all part of the narrative. It is a character unto itself. Even going to Mall Rats, the mall is kind of a part of it. It is one of the roles of the movie. It looks like a shake and bake mall that is entirely forgettable, and thus it is a forgettable character in this, and it's just like, okay, this is just for looks. This is a mall designed to be destroyed, and the destruction looks good. It's not actually got any history to it. None of the characters have got any particular connection to it or anything like that. It doesn't matter. It could have easily just been a school for all know.
In fairness, in the original, the characters didn't have a connection to the mall. It was just somewhere they came across as they were flying away from Pittsburgh. Maybe it's just a symptom of the fact that all malls look the same now. I mean, this was shot in Canada, not in the United States. The original mall was just outside of Pittsburgh in a place called Monroeville. But it's due to budget constraints. I guess they used what they had.
Yeah.
The final act being them escaping the mall and going to the docks to get onto a boat. We talked a little about the scene of them escaping being really visually spectacular. And that still holds up in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know if you noticed this, but I think I noticed it maybe the second or third time I saw it, is there's a character, one of the characters who is one of the people escaping the mall, dies off screen in the escape, and we aren't actually alerted to that fact or shown how he died. Did you happen to notice that?
Which one?
Glenn, I think he is the guy who's trying on the high heels in the mall.
Yeah.
He's just not there anymore. I think it's a very quick shot of him on the ground.
Yeah.
And like, I think if you read the trivia, apparently he dies of a broken neck, but we don't actually see how he does that. Like, what happens to him that causes, like, apart from
my shoelaces are tied.
or like the van tipping over. I mean, it is a bad sign when you go through a film and there's probably 8 or 9 main characters in the film, and one of them dies. You don't even notice until you think about it later and go, whatever happened to him? Like, he just disappeared.
Well, I mean, that could be like for James Gunn's Suicide Squad, where sort of like the weasel, seemingly dies at the beginning of the movie, and then it just cuts to later on. It just kind of shakes itself off, and it's kind of playing possum. That's funny, and that kind of would be in line for James Gunn to write a character that just gets knocked out, and then at the end, kind of just wakes up and he's fine, and he just runs off.
That would have been funny, but yeah, I don't think that's what happened. I mean, they just sort of maybe they shot a death scene and they cut it.
Maybe
one of the cool parts of a film, I think, is the chainsaw death.
Yes.
Of I don't even know the character's name. I'm looking for her character here in the trip, and I don't see it. Monica, is it Monica? I think, yeah.
Yeah.
It's sliced up with a chainsaw, which is actually spoilers. It's a 19-year-old film. I can spoil it.
Fine.
And that was a cool death. I remember thinking when I saw the film the first time, that's cool. And every time I see it, I'm like, oof, it's brutal.
Yeah. But then it was kind of one of the few highlights that the movie kind of almost wants to be more of that dumb action, grindhousey kind of feel to it. The second half of it it feels like it's trying to be a bit more grindhousey, absurdist, but it never goes all the way there, and so it's kind of like, no, okay. Because if you're going to have a big cast of people that we don't know about and don't really care about, at least show us some entertaining deaths. And they didn't really deliver on that.
So one or two were. Others were a bit cheap, like what's his name? Michael, sort of just revealing when they get to the boat, oh, we've been bitten. I'm just going to stand around and be turned into a zombie, yeah. I think apart from the chainsaw death, CJ had the best death scene of him sort of sacrificing himself with the gas tank for everything. His arc was, I would say, he's possibly the most interesting character in the film. Is his arc of starting out as an antagonist and becoming an ally to it. Unfortunately, Sarah Polley's Anna doesn't have a lot to do after the first 20 minutes. I did like I loved the credit sequence. I thought that was an interesting way to end the film, in a sense. The film continues through the credit sequence. Vignettes of their boat trip to the island.
Yeah. I thought that was quite cool because it allowed to just expand a little bit more of the story building, utilize the time of the credits, and it gave it a suitably bleak end.
It's a very nihilistic film.
Yeah. And I think that's also a very typical trope of Zack Snyder movies.
It is. I think he became known for that really nihilistic approach in his DC films, which didn't agree with a lot of people. Very dark ending. I mean, which is interesting. Again, if we compare it, which we kind of have to the original, it was actually a very hopeful ending in the 1978 version, which was not the original plan. The original plan was for a much darker ending, but at the last minute they decided to do something else. And in the film, I can spoil a 50-year-old film, and so they fly away in the helicopter at the end of the original version. We don't know what happens to them, but they're alive. Whereas I don't think there's any other way to interpret this film other than to say that they did not survive.
Yeah, they not live. They not live.
So yeah, I was a lot younger when I saw this, and maybe that was it. Being 25, 26 when it came out, and this being the kind of film that maybe appeals more to a person of that age than I am now.
I think it came out at a time where it was popular because the success of 28 Days Later as that kind of gritty, scary movie, and people had tried over the years since Dawn of the Dead to do scary zombie movies, but there was a lot of rhetoric around it, just being, oh, what's scary about a slow shifting zombie? There's a similar reason why we don't really get movies about mummies, because they're traditionally, stiff, slow shifting creeper monsters. And then 28 Days Later came in and kind of had their twist on the genre and did their thing, and then this came out. It's like, oh yeah, give them make it more terrifying, make them genuinely scary. And I think that the success of this movie is, and the longevity of popularity of zombies and what they traditionally are so frequently used of being a social commentary catalyst. I think it doesn't really gel well with blockbuster cinema, which because you end up getting things like the adaptation of World War Z. Not a good zombie movie, not a good adaptation of a great book, but it made a lot of money.
Yes, that it did. Maybe that's the Brad Pitt factor there. I'm not sure. Maybe they are better suited to television. The Walking Dead, obviously, very successful. Still going somehow. And
they've got the spin-offs as well, haven't they?
At least 2 spin-offs.
Yeah.
If you have a Walking Dead and the other one. And we've had The Last of Us, which has got incredible success. Not technically zombies.
They're not zombies. Fungal infected folk.
It was an interesting process going back to see this again, but I don't feel a need to see it again now after this. I think this has gone from a film I really enjoyed to one that I really have no time for anymore.
Yeah, I'm the same.
You have a key, sir, unless you have anything else you'd like to say.
No, I don't. Just the revelation of what the next movie is, and in a slightly similar vein to what I chose with Scooby-Doo, of doing something a little different that we don't normally do, I'm going into a different area again, and it has got a good selection of actors and a director attached that give you plenty of places to go. We are following Vin Rhames to the 2010 comedy horror as listed by IMDb movie, with such stars as Elizabeth Shue, Jerry O'Connell, Richard Dreyfuss, Ving Rhames, Christopher Lloyd, and one of the guys who helped bring horror back to the masses somewhat, Eli Roth. We're going to Piranha 3D.
Oh, good Lord.
5.5 on IMDb, 53% Metacritic score on 20 critics. After a sudden underwater tremor sets free scores of prehistoric man-eating fish, an unlikely group of strangers must band together to stop themselves from becoming fish food for the area's new razor-toothed residents.
I'd like to say I'm looking forward to this, but I'm really not.
It is available to stream on Stan, so it is readily available for everyone to watch along, because I know this is going to be a big audience spinner. Of course, the 2010 movie Piranha. But come on, I mean, that cast, you've got plenty of options on where to go, and it's directed by Alexandra Aya, who has become something of a bit of a modern horror go-to jack of all trades horror director, with such things as he did the Daniel Radcliffe starring Horns. He did Mirrors, Hills Have Eyes remake, High Tension. He's done some interesting things, but never really shown particular talent. But we're gonna have fun.
Well, yes, one could define many different ways, but yes, that is definitely going to be a film. Potentially with special effects.
What qualifies as a film.
Technically a film.
On the plus side, it is only an hour and 28 minutes.
That is pleasing, because I think maybe we can use this as an excuse to move sideways into something that's not an hour and 28 minutes that we saw the other night.
Yeah, it is definitely not an hour and 28 minutes long.
So we are talking about the film. You actually went to the cinema again, the second time in a month, I think, which is kind of special for us. Yeah. I haven't been to the cinema twice in a month for a while. And we saw John Wick Chapter 4.
Yes.
The latest in the ongoing saga of Mr. Wick. And this is a lazy 2 hours and 49 minutes long. Chad Stahelski directing again, Mr. Reeves starring again, Lawrence Fishburne, the usual Ian McShane, Lance Reddick's last role.
Yeah.
He passed away recently. John Wick uncovers a path to defeating the High Table, but before he can earn his freedom, Wick must face off against a new enemy with powerful alliances across the globe and forces to turn old friends into foes.
Mm-hmm.
We have a notable addition to the cast here. This time is Donnie Yen as the character of Kane. If you don't know Donnie Yen, you're probably not a kung fu movie fan because the guy's kind of legendary. But Rouge One, a Star Wars story. He was in as the blind.
Yes.
The Force is with me. The Force is with me guy.
Oh, that's
So, are you a big fan of the previous three films?
The first one was entertaining for what it was. The second one upped the ante, and it was more of what you expected. The third one was more of what you expected, and the fourth one is more of what you expected, except reality is a thing that this movie doesn't deal with. And so like consequences is a fluid option.
If that's one way of putting it.
Yeah. And you know, there's certain things like that idea of, this is the fourth and final one, so we're going to indulge ourselves a little bit more. This is an action movie hedonism festival because everything goes on for far too long. Everything.
Oh, I 100% agree. So just to be comparison here, John Wick 1, hour 41 minutes. John Wick 2, 2 hours and 2 minutes. John Wick 3, 2 hours and 10 minutes. John Wick 4, 2 hours and 49 minutes. So it's almost about full half an hour on top, or more than half an hour. It wasn't about 40 minutes on top of the third one, which I remember finding getting quite bored towards the end of the third one, personally. I liked the first one a lot more than I ever expected to because it sounded stupid.
Yep.
And then when I saw it, this is actually a lot of fun. The second one I thought was a lot of fun too, and because you're right, they just did the same things again and up the ante a little bit, and they didn't push it too far. They didn't get too far up their own ass with it. Third one really started to lose it for me. I could be wrong here because I haven't gone back and watched the first and the second one in a while, but I feel the third one was it really started to take its lore and the lore of the High Table and the hotels and the medallions and how it all worked and the history of all this and the history of where John Wick came from and all that kind of bizzo seemed to be taken a lot more seriously in the third one. Yeah. I felt like it, and I am open to being proven wrong because it's been so long since I saw the others. I feel like that's when it really started to come to the fore. They kind of thought, well, we've been so successful. I want to pump all this backstory into it, which I don't know. They don't care about it for me.
Yeah. But that's the big thing. For the first one, they had interesting, subtle world building lore of, it's that element of the man with no name in many ways. We don't know anything about Clint Eastwood's The Man with No Name in his spaghetti western trilogy, and there's an allure to that. It's just a guy going into these, being thrust into these scenarios, and that's what John Wick is. And then we suddenly see his gold coins, and he goes to the Continental, and they have certain phrases like, this is sanctified land that business does not get operated on. And the concierge, Chiron, Lance Reddick, rest in peace, he's like, will you be needing all of this stuff he's talking about? And it's just that subtle stuff that just feeds the story, keeps the story going, because gives John Wick the guns that he needs to kill people. But it's also so like, that's actually a really cool idea. If there are these continental hotels where hitmen can go, be safe, and regroup to go out and do their work again. That's cool. And the idea of this eponymous high table, that's cool. You don't need to explain it anymore. But then for every consecutive movie afterwards, they've been in the writers' room and going, the high table. Yeah. How many people sit at this high table? And every movie, there's gone more and more from action movie to live action filmed video game.
Right. And you know what's weird is that I don't think there has been a John Wick video game yet.
There has. John Wick Hex, I think it was.
I've never heard of it.
I'll find it. What were your thoughts on John Wick?
So it's my initial thought. We had this conversation in the foyer of a cinema as soon as we left, and myself, yourself, and Crystal all said the same thing. How long was that film? That one was way too long. That's my initial thought in this film. Any quality this film may have is overshadowed by the gargantuan length of the film.
Yes.
And it's a common complaint. Most people are probably listening to the show well used to me complaining
is our number one line.
Because I think it's getting worse. We talked about it last year when Matt Reeves' Batman was 3 hours long when it absolutely didn't need to be. This kind of self-indulgence of people who think they're going to make a 3-hour epic when we're going to be happy with, an hour 40, max 2 hours. There's a skill to telling a story in a constrained space. And look, if this is Tolkien, and not everyone likes Tolkien, but like the Peter Jackson films were great. And I think they were roughly 3 hours or so each, but it's fucking Tolkien, right? Like the guy is a very dense writer, and they are some of the most beloved stories of all time, and that's the real appeal. Is the story there? Chad Stahelski is not Peter Jackson, and John Wick is not Lord of the Rings. You do not need 3 hours to tell this story.
No.
So that is my first thought. Is like, I don't care how good this film is, how exciting the action might be. It does not need to be 3 hours long. And it was annoying. And there were so many points in the film you could have gone, man, you could have hacked 5 minutes out there, 10 minutes out there. And again, every time a film this long comes out, I say the same thing. That it was really offensively long, and it didn't need to be, and it didn't help because I was exhausted by the time I finished. I'm like, fucking finish already. To the point where I think there were after credit scenes and I couldn't be bothered hanging around.
Really?
I think there might have been. Don't quote me. I thought I read there were. I'm going to stay in the negative, and because that's where I live.
Yeah.
Can I just take a time out for a second and say I didn't hate this film.
No.
I liked a lot of what this film did, but my first thought being it's just so long. I'm like, fuck you. I don't want to hang around this film for 3 hours. That's too long. But I still liked a lot of what it did. But is it me, or is Keanu really slowing down? Like, I felt like his movement in this film was a lot less fluid than in previous.
I mean, he is getting older.
Well, that's fine. I do not have a problem with him getting older. Obviously, like everyone loves Keanu, and I think he is a fine actor, and I enjoy most of what he does. He is almost 60, and it's a little bit like I wonder what they're going to do with Harrison Ford in Indiana Jones later this year. Guy in his fucking 80s, and is he going to be like punching Nazis in the face still, like really going toe for toe with giant Nazis again, like? It's kind of ridiculous, but like it doesn't. I guess so. It feeds into one of my other criticisms: is suspension of disbelief in this film is broken. So for me, one of the first thing I'm thinking is he's moving really slowly. Like a lot of his fight moves and his grappling moves in the fight scenes feel slow and clunky to me. He doesn't feel, in the previous films, he felt like a smooth killing machine, like a real badass. Like you could almost go, wow, look, I mean, maybe he can take on 15 gods at once because like he's just that good at these fighting moves. But a lot of the moves in this one felt slow. Like they had these other henchmen with guns sitting on the side going, I'll let him throw him over there. But when he's done throwing my mate over the fence, he's fucked. I'm going to shoot him. It just didn't feel like you're like, well, why aren't they shooting him now? Why is everybody standing around waiting? And it's like a cheap 70s like.
It's like the crazy 88s. Like, why are there so many just hanging around? At least with the crazy 88s, they're swinging bloody swords. You don't want to get in the way of a sword. You don't have to get close and personal with a gun. You can.
I found myself thinking of a crazy 88 scene quite a bit during this. I'm like, I don't think any of the fight scenes in this film compare to that.
No.
But I am Tarantino fanboy hat. But that was part of it. The other one is that first of all, he got thrown off a building or shot off a building at the end of the last film, like a really tall building.
He did,
and fell, and we saw him on the ground, and like at the start of this film, he's just alive, and it's Lawrence Fishburne's character who saves him.
See, now the thing you're forgetting, Travis, and not many people seem to know this, but bulletproof suits also protect you from any harm.
Apparently.
So no bruising, no like John Wick can walk away from being run over by a car with less than me getting out of bed in the morning.
Well, I should explain that. So he's just alive again at the start of the film, and you're like, you gonna have any explanation about why he survived that fall? No. They're going to have any explanation why he survives at least one, maybe two very similar falls in this film. Like at one point as a fight in a nightclub in Berlin, which is also ridiculous because there are people dancing in this nightclub, and there's this giant fight going on in the middle of it. Everyone's just like, yeah, whatever.
Clearly, you've never been to a Berlin rave, my friend.
No, I haven't. I know people are pretty high, but he's thrown off a really high balcony sort of thing again, and just gets up and brushes it off. And in the later scene, in a very good scene at the Arc de Triomphe, where they have a really cool fight sequence in amongst the cars doing around a roundabout. I think it's in that one where he's basically hit by a car a couple of times, if I'm not mistaken, and thrown into a van and brushed himself off and just keeps going. And I'm like, he's not Superman, guys.
But you're forgetting something. Another thing. Not only is he wearing the bulletproof suit, but clearly, as demonstrated by the dog's involvement in that sequence, cars don't hit as hard as you think, sir.
Maybe they're special French cars who just surrender as soon as they hit someone.
Bouncy.
No, if it's a one, I surrender.
It is a safety protocol, we just hit something and go boing.
I don't know. It just gets to the point you're like, this is just a bit too silly, guys. In a Marvel film, at least they are superheroes, right? They have some form of a suit or a superpower or magic or
John
something.
Wick is a mutant.
Maybe that would be a kind of interesting crossover, but he has been looking for something to do in the MCU. But there's no
they want
explanation
him to be Wolverine, and in this movie, he puts Wolverine through his paces.
Yes. If he had adamantium bones, that might be an explanation, but he does not, as far as I know. So it's kind of like, well, how is this working? Is there some reason why he can do these things that we don't know about? And maybe I'm not supposed to care, but I'm stupid. I don't know. You can't. It's the suspension of disbelief. You can go into a film and believe it's not real. It is. It's not real, but you don't care because you're enjoying the story, or the internal logic of the story allows this to happen. There is internal logic about why he can survive these things. He just can.
Yep.
And that includes
there's reasons.
The fight sequence down the stairs. Which was an interesting idea of a fight sequence on the stairs.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you what.
What I got flashes of with the first time he went up the stairs was the corridor sequence from Old Boy. That idea of just this persistent fight going along, and they kind of echoed trying to do something similar in the Netflix Daredevil show with the kind of corridor fight sequences there, where they did really, really well for that as well as in Old Boy. This is like, okay, that fight sequence, Sure. Okay, he's fighting all the way up. That's good. It's it's like Atlas shoving a boulder up the mountain, to defy the gods and all of that sort of stuff. But then it's like, okay, just kick. And I don't know if you heard me in the cinema when he started rolling down the stairs. I just started singing the Benny Hill theme.
I think I can actually share a part of a sequence so people can see what I'm talking about here. This is the John Wick section of him down the stairs.
Ah! 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 Before we get a copyright ban.
You bet. Yeah. That was the first thing I thought of when I saw that. It's just someone needs to do put that sound effect over him being thrown down the stairs. I've been negative so far. Look, cool shit in this film. There's a sequence, and this is interesting because I think you're going to differ than me in this one. There is a sequence, a fight sequence where they shot it a little bit differently. It was shot a little bit like Hotline Miami, the video game, where the camera almost looks at it from a top-down, God's eye perspective of a fight sequence. I thought that was really cool, really original, and it kind of livened up the scene for me because it was the first time we would get that fight. It was getting a little bit old at that point in time, so it did something interesting and different there. I think you didn't like that, though.
I liked it for about 2 minutes, and then it just kept going. And very quickly, it got very boring because I love those top-down shooters. They're really cool. They're really fun because you're just going through and you're wrecking shit. You're seeing sort of like shit just get knocked off the walls and all of that sort of stuff. You feel like a badass. I want to play that. I don't want to just watch it and be a passive viewer of it. So like, okay, just do that. And the fact that they had the dragon's breath kind of thing, that looked cool. But it was sort of like, all right, you needed to, because there was this, the bit that I really liked was where he kind of came up the stairs and was shooting he was using a normal gun and then he was using the dragon's breath to go sort of like up, and the camera kind of panned up and through, and there was more movement rather than just it looking down and just tracking him, which was boring. The verticality made it feel interesting and exciting, and it's like, okay, that's cool. This is, and it didn't just make it feel like, oh, they're doing this just to show off choreography with weapons. And Michelle made a very good point of like they did not skimp on the safety protocols compared to the movie Rust.
Too soon. That didn't bother me at all. I didn't find it boring. I thought it was interesting, and it was so different than something we hadn't. And it was such a nice change from the way most of the other fight sequences were filmed. And it was a break, it freshened things up for me. Yeah. Other things I liked, Bill Skarsgård. I think he was very decent in this film. I've seen a lot of people complain, or people who didn't like the film, complain that he didn't add much. I think he does what he does very well. In a sense, he plays a villain very well. And you want to dislike this guy.
Yeah.
He plays this sort of snooty, aristocratic marquis with a level of arrogance and that really makes you want to see him cop it. So, which of course he does in the end because,
spoilers.
I mean, come on. So I thought that was an interesting addition. Donnie Yen, I am not a kung fu aficionado. His work in, I'm assuming they're Hong Kong films or Chinese films. The Ip Man series, I've not seen any of those.
Ip Man movies are really good, but his introduction was really, really great in this movie. He's great, and they're already talking about possibly he'd be down for doing a spin-off following Kane. But going back to your conversation about Keanu looking slow, Donnie Yen is so damn fast.
Yes.
And it looks awesome. It looks beautifully powerful and graceful, and he's just so quick, and it just makes everyone else around him look kind of rubbish. Which, I mean, he's done again. He's a master. That's what he does. So it's not, it's not necessarily sort of like, oh well, he should have done something, but he's not the main character.
No, but he really adds a nice angle. So
Mm.
the idea of him being a former friend and colleague of John's, yet being tasked to kill him, makes him an interesting sort of free radical in this film in a lot of ways, because we know he will kill John if he has to save his daughter, which is his motivation. But we know he doesn't really want to kill John. So we know there's an opportunity to help him or to get out of what he is doing. But his need to kill John Wick, he will. And I like that. And I think the scene where they fight up the stairs together at the end is a good one.
What did you think of the other John Wick friend of Shimaza, played by Hiroki Sanada?
I mean, it was fine, I guess. Again, that made me think about whether he was using a Hattori Hanzo sword or something else. I feel like he's popped up a bit lately. It also reminded me of something that it shouldn't have reminded me of, in the sense that it made me think of Bullet Train, which controversially I think is a much better film than this one.
I feel like it knows Bullet Train knows its absurd level and just goes, yep, that's where we are, and that's what you are here for. And John Wick kind of takes itself too seriously.
I feel like John Wick takes itself very, very seriously now. Like, I know they're supposed to be
the vestiges on Clancy Brown's character, where he's literally just talking and being the guy who's just saying, okay, because his introduction is really cool, and his name, the Harbinger, it's really cool. It's like, fuck, it's Clancy Brown. That's cool. And he's called the Harbinger, and he just delivers an hourglass. That's cool. But then he does nothing cool. What's Clancy Brown for?
The original Kurgan. I was glad to see him.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole. Frankly, you could have probably yada the whole sequence in Japan. It doesn't add much.
Yeah.
Interesting. I was expecting that character's daughter, who survives that scene, to come back, and I think she might have been in one of the
credits.
After credits, yeah. So you don't want your actors to remind you. I guess I will be one of very, very few people, I think, who says Bullet Train's a better film than this one, but it successfully reminded me. Remember how Bullet Train was like really fun and goofy, and it didn't take itself at all seriously, and it had funny characters, and the fight scenes were ridiculous, but they were hanging on to the front of a fucking moving bullet train that you didn't care, because it was having so much fun at the same time. The film was having fun, not going, wow, this is all part of some very deep lore, half written by some guy who saw Death Machine once, but the sound was off, but I think he got the gist of it. I don't know, like it's just takes itself so fucking seriously, and like, can we just have some fun? Like, remember how the first one was fun? Yeah. I also don't like how John Wick doesn't feel like the hunter anymore. He's the Baba Yaga, right? The boogeyman. In the first one, he was like, oh my God, you can't believe you pissed this guy off. He's never the hunter anymore. He's always the hunted.
Yeah. And that's, you only get a slight hint of that right near the end, where the Marquis is... it's one of the fun phone interactions between Mr. Nobody and the Marquis, and the Marquis is phoning him, just saying, "Do this," and he's like, "No, this is my money, 30 million. Hang up." And the evolving panic and fear in the Marquis, as it's sort of like, I've thrown Paris at this guy, and he's still coming. That was the one time where you kind of think, yeah, that's a good point. That everyone has gone up against this guy, and he's still going. yes, you should be scared.
I think we got to try and wrap this up. We got to get on. We
yes.
got to snappy, but I just wanted to call out and get your opinion on. Apparently, the inspiration for this film was The Warriors.
The Warriors.
One of my favorite films from the late 70s. If you haven't seen it, YouTube the trailer. It's a masterpiece. And there's actually a direct rip from the Warriors in the Paris sequence where we have a radio announcer going, "Hey, boppers, there's this guy, trying to escape and playing Nowhere to Run To," which I think happened in the Warriors as well, if I'm not mistaken. I found myself going initially, it's the Warriors. Okay, you're just going to use the same basic plot device as the radio host, okay? But then I found myself thinking, this film would have been a lot more entertaining if the whole film was like the Warriors, like John Wick trying to fight his way from one side of Paris to Sacré-Cœur. That was the film, rather than fucking around in Berlin and Tokyo and New York and stuff.
And randomly the desert.
Sorry?
Randomly the desert as well.
Randomly the desert. And, I could have lived without the baseball Furies. Again, sorry, Warriors reference there. If you haven't seen it, you won't know. But what did you make of that that homage?
It's there's a number of this movie kept on reminding me of other movies, and much like Matrix 4, whatever, refinanced, that movie was literally showing you sequences from the first Matrix movie and going, "Oh yeah, I'd rather watch that movie." I felt the same thing here. It's like, okay, yep, you're doing homages, but these other movies just did it kind of better. Which is, yeah, if John Wick 4 had kind of cut down every action sequence by 5 minutes, it would be a much more manageable length, and it would feel better. It feels hefty and bloated. And so any time that there are these homages, it's like, oh yeah, they used their time better.
Well, they didn't have the luxury of the kind of budget that Chad Stahelski has now.
Yeah.
And again, it's a little bit like somebody who's been given money that they'd never had when they made the first one, or when they originally came up with the concept. And the original Warriors from 1979 is an hour 33 minutes, and it is a dense hour 33 minutes of nonstop balls to the wall action. With none of the law of this. Sorry, I'm going on about the law. I really shouldn't. But anyway, I don't mind John Wick 4. If you liked the last one, you'll love this one probably. Most people are loving it.
Yeah.
I thought it was okay, but just too long for me to abide. Yeah. I couldn't recommend it at this length personally, but take that lack of recommendation with a grain of salt. So many people I've seen online are saying it's an action masterpiece.
I don't think it's worthy of that, because when I think of action masterpieces, I think of Mad Max Fury Road.
Or Die Hard. Or The Warriors, for example. Yeah. I mean, I personally would call that a masterpiece. But anyway, we want to be snippy. We don't want to keep going on and on and on. If you disagree with us, then don't hate us.
Let's talk about the...
It's trying to get now for something completely different.
Yes. Something entirely completely different. Triangle of Sadness.
This is an English language, first English language film by his Norwegian director Ruben Östlund, and he has made a number of foreign language films. One of which I saw called Force Majeure, and he's sort of really well known for he's Swedish. Sorry, my bad, not Norwegian.
They're not the same, Travis.
Same. I like to make an apology to all our Norwegian friends. A fashion model, celebrity couple join an eventful cruise for the super rich. Faces and names you will know in this film. Woody Harrelson.
Yes.
End of list. And he's not even in it for very long.
No.
Faces and names you will know soon. Harris Dickinson plays Carl, who is sort of our protagonist. I think he is going to be a bit of a star.
I wouldn't be surprised if someone at Marvel reaches out to him for something because he's got the look.
I think he used to be a model, and I don't think he's a bad actor. I think he did okay in this film with an interesting role. It's hard to know what to make of this one. So that synopsis is a little bit like that time we watched the film about the Korean farmers, where like a Korean person moves to America and starts a farm.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more than that. Ruben Östlund's wickedly funny Palme d'Or winner, social hierarchy is turned upside down, revealing the tawdry relationship between power and beauty. Celebrity model couple Carl and Yaya are invited on a luxury yacht for the uber-rich, helmed by an unhinged boat captain played by Woody Harrelson. What first appears what appeared Instagrammable ends catastrophically, leaving survivors stranded on a desert island fighting for survival. It's a very odd film, but I think it's saying a lot about class. And personally, I think it might have something to say about how that played out during the pandemic. And that's just my opinion. I don't know when it was written, but we have the uber good-looking couple of models, as I said, played by Carl, played by Harris Dickinson, and Yaya, played by, I'm going to say Charlie Dean. There's a B in there, but I don't really exactly know how I'm supposed to pronounce that. Sadly, she passed away before this film was released.
Yeah.
Which is, again,
22. Goodness me.
quite young.
Yeah.
And they are a couple of models. We see them fighting at the start of a film about money, but they make up and end up going on this cruise together, which they are given tickets to because they're influencers.
Yeah.
And the people on the boat are incredibly rich people.
Yeah.
We meet like
I sell shit.
Yes, Dimitri, played by the well-known Zlatko Burek, who is a fertilizer salesman and has both his wife and his mistress on the same cruise. You might have seen you might have seen Zlatko in films like 2012. You won't recognize him. It's hard to describe this film exactly.
What is your what do you think the point of this movie is? Just how would you sum it up?
I think the way it's talking about is it's difficult to remember in the pandemic where all of a sudden at the start of this pandemic and this or that because it's still this in 2020, 3 years ago now, when we started the chain, believe it or not, people, all of a sudden people who had been dismissed as low skilled, superfluous, overlooked type people, storemen, delivery drivers, train drivers, that kind of thing, food delivery drivers, abattoir workers, factory workers who make food, that kind of thing, fruit pickers, that kind of stuff. Lowest of the low sort of level jobs, as we would sort of put them, at low paid, low prestige jobs. All of a sudden, these people were really fucking important. People who stock the shelves of your supermarket became really important. The people who drive the trucks full of shit from a warehouse became important. The people who work at those warehouses become important. The people who work at the abattoirs that supply the warehouses became really fucking important. And what happened to them mattered for the first time in living memory, really. And, I remember sort of seeing things kicking around at the time going, isn't this really interesting? It's shining a spotlight right now on exactly how fucking useful is a CEO or a CFO, right? Like, to everyone's day-to-day lives, to a degree, I guess, keeping X company profitable so it doesn't collapse is probably a good thing for people who work there. But on a day-to-day thing, what impact do these super high lawyers, really high, that kind of thing, what do they really do for you in your life? How useful are they to our society? Not useful enough that they're paid a lot of money, but when the chips are down, they're fucking worthless, right? The billionaires are useless. The guy who knows how to string up and cut up a cow so you can get the edible parts of it, that's fucking useful. The guy who's prepared to deliver food to your supermarket in the middle of a pandemic, that's useful. So I'm going on a little bit here. I think that's what the film's sort of talking about. If we get to the crux of a film, we see the level of luxury provided to the uber rich on the boat. But I guess spoil it a little bit here, people, so you can keep walking if you don't want to know. After the boat sinks and the survivors are washed up on the island, the lowest of the low, who was like a maid's assistant or something, I think it was like a toilet cleaner or something.
Yeah.
A toilet technician or something, a toilet cleaner, became basically their queen because she was the only one who had the skill set on how to survive.
How to start a fire and catch fish.
Start a fire and catch fish was her skill set. But that made her the most valuable person on that island who had survived. The super rich Russian guy, worthless. The beautiful couple of influencers, worthless. The woman who used to run the crew on the boat, worthless. It was all the IT guy who sold his company for billions of dollars, worthless. It was all that down to that one woman who knew how to do what was necessary to survive. And I think it's making a point about that. That was my takeaway from this is the pandemic showed us a truth is that, and I'm going to include myself in this, that my skill set in a zombie apocalypse would be fucking worthless. You would not want, I met someone today at a work function who used to do clay target shooting.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, that person, I want on my zombie apocalypse team because they have a useful skill. I do not. So that was my takeaway is that like we've been shown whoever valuable people are amongst us at the end of the day, the skills that these people have, people who we look down on, are crucial to us, and in certain circumstances are irreplaceable. And when the chips are down is when you find out which skills and what people really matter.
That is a much better explanation of what this movie is than I was able to come up with because finished it and Crystal asked me, what was the message of that movie? Like, think it had something to do with class. I think trying to say a lot of things. I don't know if it quite succeeded in any of them. I didn't like this movie, and I think I didn't like it because maybe my own expectation was warped because I was kind of anticipating something along the lines of Chris Morris or Armando Iannucci style parody and farce, and that isn't this. It's not really funny in any way. It's certainly not laugh out loud funny. There's elements of to it, like the twist of power with the toilet cleaner becoming the queen and starting this matriarchy essentially. And the sequence, just the little conversation where she says, I'm the one who starts the fires, I'm the one who cooks the fish, I should get something a little bit more for that. And so the influencers are like, yep, the only thing that I can offer is sex. And it's like, okay, yep, that's interesting. But at the same time, the way the movie ends, which I won't go into full details for just for protection of the movie. What do you because it kind of takes, I feel like the idea that you presented of this being kind of an allegory for COVID, I think it makes that much more poignant and that makes more sense to me, the way that it ends and what it means to the characters and what it means what's likely going to happen to them after the movie rolls. And it's like, okay, that now makes more sense. But as I was watching it, it was like, I don't entirely know what's going on. I was interested in the sequences with Woody Harrelson and the Russian oligarch kind of guy. Where is he? Dmitry, where they're just drunk talking about socialism and capitalism and things like that. I thought that was funny and an interesting twist on sort of like the Marxist American socialist versus the capitalist Russian kind of thing. That was like, okay, that's kind of cool, and they're talking and it's entertaining, but I don't quite know why. I don't think I'm smart enough for this movie.
I think you're not supposed to enjoy it, is my theory. I think I saw one of his previous films called Force Majeure a few years ago,
Mm.
and it's kind of designed to make you uncomfortable.
Mm.
And I think so. I think if it's made you uncomfortable, then I think it's done its job. I also did not think it was particularly funny. People were going, "Oh, it's uproariously funny," and I'm like, "Okay." It's like the Banshees of Inisherin. Like when people who said that was funny, I'm like,
Yeah.
I didn't laugh very much. I didn't. It wasn't even like a, yeah, it's funny. Like I didn't get any of the funny from that. I didn't get a lot of funny from this.
Mm.
It is interesting that the final sequence, which we won't spoil, but
Mm.
I think I'll say this. Apparently, according to the actor involved, she did what you think she was going to do.
Mm.
But I think it's an interesting microcosm of the the ignorance of the rich when the character says what she says that I don't think very cryptic here. Says what she says that makes the thing happen.
Yeah.
And you can imagine, I found myself going, "Oh, that person's so stupid. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
Don't you know what the consequences of doing that thing will be?"
Yeah.
But it must be very. Imagine being that person for a moment. Imagine being the lowest of the low, suddenly ruling over, these
Yeah.
rich, powerful people. Briefly, even giving that up would be very, very difficult
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
Though interesting, it's. I recalled a story. I'll be quick. But do you know who Kerry Packer is or was?
Name rings a bell for some reason, but I don't know why.
He was Australia's sort of a very rich man who used to live. He owned like Channel 9 and he owned a lot of magazines and stuff like that. His son James Packer you might have heard of as well. He used to
Oh
own
yeah.
a Crown Casino. Was married to. He was hooked up with Mariah Carey for a while as well. Interestingly, so Kerry used to have heart problems. Once upon went before he died. And he has a famous story. I don't know how true it is, so don't come at me if it's not. I remember hearing a story that he got rushed to hospital once from wherever he was, had his clothes cut off, and basically they saved his life. But when he left the hospital, he basically, this is pre-mobile phones, had left in a hospital gown and had no way to actually pay for a cab or any way to get home, and asked someone for cab fare who recognized him and gave him $50 for the cab, and he gave his name and address, and then a couple of days later, I got a check for like $100,000 or something like that. I might be missed, but that was a story that reminded me of this, them stuck on the island and her lording it over these people seemed very short-sighted to me because, the pragmatist in me would go, okay, lord it over a bit, but don't forget, one day you're getting off the island and you want these people on your side.
Yeah.
That was a part that also actually kind of bothered me a bit. And this is the fact there's all these super rich people, billionaires apparently, who have their boat is sunk, and no one finds them.
Yeah.
Like it's like they would have known where that ship was, right? Like, because those things have beacons and satellite shit, and when they go down, they have little satellite doohickeys. And imagine if, like,
and it didn't seem like they were on the boat for long either.
No, it didn't seem like they were out in the middle of the Atlantic or, it's not Gilligan's Island or anything here. It's imagine if it was some, I don't know, Bill Gates kind of level character, maybe not quite that famous, but, billionaires went missing. They're not going to fucking just go, oh, well, fuck them. The people are going to look for them, right? So the fact that they were there for so long without anybody finding them was, I don't know if I believe that. That was the part that seemed a little bit convenient for me. I can't say. I mean, this is a very uncomfortable film to watch. The scenes during the storm on the boat are cringeworthy to the extreme, but that's for a reason, right? should we say, it's almost Mr. Creosote level of uncomfortable viewing, you know.
Oh no.
George
I
got that one.
I did not find that sequence cringeworthy. It was comical, and it was I don't know. It kind of kind of reminded me of, like, I was looking at it thinking, so like, oh, this is a little bit like something like The Young Ones or something like that. And it just seemed kind of it felt like it was taken out of a different movie. And I don't I so much of this movie seems to be designed to elicit or express something important that the writer director wanted to say, and I don't entirely know the meaning of why that was. I did like when the food was being handed out and Woody Harrelson's character got burger and chips. It was like, okay, that's nice. I like that. That was a cute little moment. But yeah, I just, this movie didn't gel with me in any way, shape, or form. I didn't think it was good. I don't think anyone did a good job acting in it, really. I felt like this was definitely not a movie for me, and yeah, I don't think it's designed for me.
It's an acquired taste. Just to note
Mm.
that, I mean, in case I think I deliberately inflicted something of poor quality on George.
No,
How about Scooby Doo?
he only does that when
It
he
was
wants to laugh at me.
it was nominated for Best Picture and Best Director at the Oscars this year. So
Yeah.
it's not to say it's good. I just think it is.
Mm.
I think there's a lot going on in this film, and it can take away kind of what you want from it. But
Yeah.
I do not go into this film expecting an easy watch.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not going to get it.
No, it's, you kind of left scratching your head at the end of it. It's like, I'm not sure what I watched. I think, was it about this? I don't know. But anyway.
Anyway, it's unique. That's all I can say.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I watched, and that's the end of that statement.
I liked it a lot more with George. I think there's a lot of subtlety and satire going on about class in this. I have trouble quite verbalizing exactly what it is because I'm pretty stupid. So that was just what made me. I don't know whether the director intended to ape that idea of COVID really shining the light on what society really needs from people, but that was what it made me think of anyway.
Mm.
So we'll bury that one. We won't bring that one up again. But what we will do is move on to binge, browse, burn before we lock it up for another week.
Burn. Yeah. So, what have you got for entries?
I have a couple to start with, and the first one's a binge entry, though you're not allowed to binge it because it's one of those annoying ones. It's coming out week by week.
Ugh.
And this is the new Bob Odenkirk show, Lucky Hank. You can watch Lucky Hank in Australia on Stan, streaming a new episode every week. An English department chairman with an underfunded college, Professor Hank Devereaux, toes the line between midlife crisis, full-blown meltdown, navigating the offbeat chaos in his personal and professional life. We're only 2 episodes up so far, so it might be me getting ahead of the game, but I'm really digging this. This is a suitably antagonistic role for someone like Bill Odenkirk. Cranky, cynical, sarcastic, everything you love about the man. He's also a blocked writer. He's an English professor who wrote one novel 20, 30 years ago, never wrote a follow-up, even though he's working on it. He's the son of a much more famous and successful father who he has no relationship with. He has a difficult or a relationship with his wife that could be approaching difficulty. His colleagues don't particularly like him. His students absolutely don't like him. In fact, one of the common one of the arcs seems to be a particular student who he tells exactly what he thinks of his writing, who is sort of a typical Gen Z entitled person. Like I don't know if they're actually trying to do that, but he kind of looks exactly like the kind of person who would try and cancel his university professor for criticizing his writing, which is notably awful. It's other than Bob Odenkirk, I don't think you're going to know a lot of faces in here. I'm going to say that I'm really digging the first 2 episodes.
Okay.
If this was available all at once, I would have smashed. But it's not, so I just have to be patient.
Okay. My first one for today is season 2 of Shadow and Bone. It is the follow-up to a young adult book series that has been adapted to the big screen. I talked about the first season, I think it was last year, maybe a year and a half ago at this point. It was pretty good. It was interesting. There was a interesting kind of Prussian vibe to some of the nations that were in there. This expands on that overall, but at the same time, it kind of loses itself in the weeds a little bit, introducing a few too many characters and expecting us to be interested in them when they're not necessarily interesting characters or not fully fleshed out characters. This is definitely a browse for me because it is a time investment, and it's not trying to be highbrow. It's not trying to be award worthy or anything like that. This is a cut above CW, shall we say?
That's not saying much.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is this got a young adult oriented as its audience, you think?
100%. Yeah. It's got a little bit of awkward romance kind of thing with a little bit of flirtation and a bit more sex appeal than you get in maybe a typical PG kind of show. Nothing like Outlander or Bridgerton or any of those ones, which is like, ooh, this one's a bit more fun. But it's fine. None of the actors are particularly great except for the cast of The Crows, which have already been told that there's going to be a spin-off series around them because they are unequivocally the most interesting characters in the show, and you can tell every single time they're on screen. So I'm okay with that. But yeah, otherwise it's fine if you're interested in high fantasy / alternate period kind of young adult themed genre pieces. You'll like this. You won't like this, Travis. I know for a fact.
I look at the post, and it's not really my jam. Fantasy and young adult is enough to make me go, not for me, thank you.
Yes. This knows what audience it's going for, and it'll hit that lowest common denominator.
Don't talk it up too hard. My next one, I had a couple to pick from, but I'm going to save Yellow Jackets for next week. We have season 2 of Yellow Jackets. For those who regular listeners, one of the shows of a year for me last year. But give it another episode to see how we go. I'm going to say I'm going to be controversial here and say a strong browse rating here for Succession. So we have just had season 4 begin of Succession, and I don't know, are you on board with this show or not?
Not watched anything, don't know anything about it.
It's massive. This is people are losing their shit about how good this is. I think I watched an episode of this 3 or 4 years ago, maybe longer, 2018, and talked about it on the show, and I didn't really like it, and I never went back and watched it again. So here we are now. We are to the 4th and final season of Succession, and it has an 8.8 rating on IMDb, number 68 on IMDb's top TV shows of all time. People are losing their shit. It is Game of Thrones in the boardroom, I think, is the description I saw.
Well, I'm just looking at by Jesse Armstrong, and he did 4 Lions and In the Loop, so I'm interested.
Yes, 4 Lions, one of the funniest movies you've never seen. Do check it
Yeah.
out. This is not funny. So what we did, because I had watched episode 1 5 years ago and had no memory of what was, except that I didn't like it. I watched 2 episodes in season 1. Said, okay, this is interesting-ish. Then watched a 15-minute catch-up video about what happened in the next 3 seasons, so I could start watching season 4, which was actually a helpful way of doing it. So I had it's a lot to catch up on. I'm not sitting through 3 seasons of TV. And also, Michelle, huge fan of Succession, wants to start watching it. So at least by watching the catch-up video, I can just jump on board.
Okay.
Essentially, it's the Disney's meets the Murdochs meets the Trumps as our main family of Succession, headed up by the patriarch, played by Logan Roy, played by the great Brian Cox. He is an absolute bastard. He is, Rupert Murdoch-y, a little bit of Trump mixed in. He has and it's about him and his family, and I guess the struggle for the control of his company, and probably more deeply the struggle for his attention and his love, because he doesn't give it out very easily. We have Kieran Culkin playing Roman Roy. We have, Jeremy Strong playing Kendall Roy. Sarah Snook, the Australian actor. Yay, Sarah is brilliant. She should be working more often. You've seen Predestination, I think, the Ethan Hawke film
yeah.
she was in. She was in that. She's fantastic. She plays Shiv Roy or Siobhan. The other one in here is Alan Ruck, who plays Connor Roy. And the 4 of them, Connor is kind of the oldest son from a previous marriage. So he's only a half brother to the other 3. He's kind of hands off and kind of like, I am just going to go with what everybody else does. He's not really a major player other than running for president by the start of season 4, which is super weird. I wasn't there for the other 3 seasons. I only saw the catch up. The other sort of main characters in here are Greg Hirsch, who is a cousin to the others, who we meet in episode 1, working at one of the Roy's theme parks, where he gets fired for getting stoned and throwing up inside one of the mascot costumes. So that's kind of funny, I guess. That's only the second funniest thing that happened in a mascot costume in a film involving Jesse Armstrong. If you've seen 4 Lions, you know what I'm talking about. It's good. So, and the other one in here is Tom Wamsigans, played by Matthew McFadden, who is Shiv Roy's now estranged husband, who is an employee of Logan Roy. So we've got all these different players sort of going on and all these different agendas to try and come together to, by the 4th season, the gist of the show is, I'm sorry if you haven't watched the other 3, but you can watch the catch-up video like me. The 4 of maybe 3 sort of central Roy children are working together to basically try and topple their father and stymie him in whichever way they can. Having had their shares of his company taken away from them through some shenanigans involving their father in the last season. Everybody's excellent. Brian Cox, right? Brian Cox is just, he's the man, right? If you want someone to play a fucking curmudgeon, he's the guy you probably want to do it. Kieran Culkin, in one of the best things I've ever seen Kieran Culkin do. Like, I thought that was Scott Pilgrim, but it's
that's exactly where my brain went.
He's actually playing a very similar character that he did in Scott Pilgrim, but just spin it a little bit differently. And you've got Roman Roy. Kendall Roy, played by Jeremy Strong, really kind of interesting, sort of Eric Trump kind of character, sort of addiction issues, weak-willed, lack of killer instinct. And Shiv Roy is very complex and layered character who may in fact be the biggest badass of the entire family. And sort of, I get the impression is she could go either way about whether she'll stick with them or destroy them. And why I'm not going an absolute binge on this is it's super well written. And it's got all the money in the world spent on it. It looks fantastic. Great actors, great writing, great everything. Just the characters are so deeply uninteresting in a sense. They're a bunch of rich fucks fighting about who gets to be the biggest rich fuck. And I'm like, I don't understand why that's such an interesting story to me. Maybe if I'd spent 3 seasons with them, I'd care a little bit more about it. I like the characters. It is interesting and it is entertaining. It's just, I don't know. Who gets to be who gets to control this company? Do I care? Is kind of why I'm kind of a little bit in that space occasionally. I'm like, okay, so they're really pissed off because their dad did this thing. It means they don't control the company anymore. If they really wanted to, they could just sell all their shares and go and sit off on an island somewhere next to the people from Triangle of Sadness, and and just be billionaires for the rest of their life. That doesn't sound so bad to me. If I would probably do that if I were them, but then there would be no story. So that's probably the only thing for me is the subject matter isn't all that interesting to me.
Okay.
Family dynamics, maybe that's not where my interests sit. But look, if you're not already on this one and you're like me and George and you've kind of given it a wide berth, you got 3 seasons there all ready to go for you to enjoy. And a 4th season has already started. So it'll probably be done by the time you finish watching the other 3 seasons. And you could do a lot worse.
Okay. The last one that I'll talk about is another soft browse, and it just keeps on just going slowly towards the burn. The longer it goes on, because now they don't have any end plan. The Mandalorian. It's doing more of what it has been doing for the last 2 seasons, but it's now at a point where it's like, okay. Even Dave Filoni, the main guy behind the successful Star Wars stuff, as they like to tout, curious. We may not be alive online. I don't know what's happening with my thing. I'm going to try refreshing and just see what happens. It won't let me refresh. Interesting. Okay. Well,
we'll keep recording for the podcast people.
Recording for now, because at the moment my screen is very different to what it's supposed to be. But yeah, that's fine. We seem to still be live on the channels, so I guess that's fine. Yeah. So Mandalorian started off with just telling us. Essentially a Western in space, and then it started to expand out and do more with the greater universe of Star Wars. And now Dave Filoni has come out and like, yeah, I don't really know where I'm going with the story. Kind of need to. Not exactly got a good heritage of TV shows where we don't know where we're going, resulted in must-watch to the end TV.
More relevantly, there isn't a good track record of Star Wars without having a plan about where you're going with your series of films or shows.
Yeah, and especially when literally the lead-in to Mandalorian Season 3 was the Book of Boba Fett, where they just gave up on the end. It's like, yeah, Boba Fett, you can go away for a bit. We'll bring in the Mandalorian and do this as a soft launch. It was... there we go. We're back on. Everything's showing that it's all right. Excellent. Good. That was weird. Yeah. So it's sort of okay. Did you're just doing this for the money and you don't care? Okay. Oh yes, that's right. You're a Disney property. Cool. It's still fine. Pedro Pascal is still great. The overall feel of it is entertaining. And if you liked season 1 and season 2, you'll probably like this one, but it's missing some of the magic from those first 2 seasons, so far at least. And I'm watching it just for something to watch and to talk about, but it's getting closer and closer. The longer this goes on, the more it's like, okay, this should have been just 2 seasons. Just introduce us to a cool character and let's move on to something else.
That's something I'll say for Succession. They're top of their game. Huge interest. They're ending it after 4 seasons because that's the story.
Yeah. It's amazing what happens when you actually plot out a whole story and, spend time making it, paced well.
Or at least when you get to the go, I think this is it. I don't think I've got a whole lot more to tell. Walk away.
Yeah. Anything else you wanted to talk about?
I think that's it. And apparently we were live on the YouTube, so thank you, Shell, for that.
Thank you.
But I think it's time to say goodnight. We're at an hour 40.
Yeah.
We've kind of gone a bit over, but it's pretty good for us by historic standards.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. This has been episode 177 of the Armchair Producers, where we talked about our chain movie of the week, Dawn of the Dead. We're going to be talking about Piranha 3D for the next one, following Ving Rhames from Dawn of the Dead to Piranha 3D. We talked about John Wick 4, as well as Triangle of Sadness, and then Binge, Browse, Burn, where we had Lucky Hank, Shadow and Bone, Succession Season 4, and Mandalorian Season 3. Binge, browse for the quick snapshot of those ones. Look at that. Did that in less than a minute.
There you go. Well done.
Don't forget to follow us at twitch.tv/friedbrain, where you can also donate if you want to. There is up here in this corner, we've got our donate thing. If you want to get a membership for Restream, kicks us $10, which is cool. Facebook.com/armchairproducers, Twitch, at the Fried Brain, at Evil Trav on Twitter. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got any recommendations, put them in the chat. That's it.
Good night,
ladies and gentlemen. Next time.